Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Sardeep, your coordinator for this webinar. Thank you for standing by and welcome to the webinar on 5 building blocks for a SOC that rocks. During the course of presentation, all participants' line will be in listen-only mode. Should you wish to ask any question, you may use the chat facility to send your questions to all panelists, and we'll try to address as many questions we can during the Q&A session. I would like to now invite our speaker for today. We have with us Mr. N.V. Umashankar, who is a cybersecurity advisor. Thank you, and over to you, sir.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. I will now be sharing a webinar recording that one of my colleagues has delivered recently. And I just reiterate, at any point of time during the webinar, if you have any questions, please write it down in the chat panel, and I'll respond to it at the end of the session. We will start the recording now. Have a good time.
So before I get into the how, let's talk about the what a little bit. So when you're considering building a security operations center, there are many things to consider. Some of the higher level things to consider are, what is the model I'm going to use? It's important to use a model because otherwise you're going to miss something. And there are plenty of models out there. I'm not going to advocate for any specific model, but you can see a list of 4 there. I'm sure there are even more that I'm not aware of. These are great models to give you an idea of the cycle and the process, and make sure your gaps are filled and everything is covered. The one on the right is a representation of the NIST framework that's listed there. The other thing to think about is the types, or how you build it out. This is fairly straightforward, but just to go over very quickly, are you going to staff and build this entirely internally? Are you going to outsource all of it, or are you going to outsource some of it? And when I say outsource, I'm talking about people, and I'm talking about tools and systems as well. So these are things that you want to consider before you even get started. And once you do get started, what things do you want to think about when you're building this out? So let's talk about business strategy. It's important that you begin by ensuring your security strategy is aligned with your business strategy. If they start to go down separate tracks and they're not aligned, that can cause you problems down the road. If your business strategy has a 1-year vision and a 5-year vision, make sure your security strategy has a 1-year vision and a 5-year vision, and make sure that they align with each other. The other thing about that consideration is time frame, right? So when we think about security, when we think about IT, we like to think about solutions. We like to think about technology. Unfortunately, that's short-term thinking, and that gets us, a year out. That gets us a few months out. That gets us to the next quarter. We need to think in longer horizons and longer time frames. People and processes are some of the things we want to build and build rigor into. We want to think about the outcome as opposed to the technology. Next thing is intelligence. So I think a lot of us, most of you, have probably heard about intelligence and think about intelligence when you're thinking about security and security operations. Interestingly, the trend over recent times has been around, threat intelligence, and that's super important. And you'll see on the left that's accounted for, right? What do we know about vulnerabilities? What do we know about campaigns? What do we know about the capabilities of the bad guys out there? That's absolutely important. That data needs to be available. But the other thing that we tend to spend less time with is our asset intelligence, our system intelligence, and our business intelligence. Those things are also key and important context in delivering security operations. Coordinating those things, bringing those things together, correlating those things that is the essence of what an analyst does, and that is the essence of what has to occur inside of an operations system. Now, the other thing that has to lay over the top of this whole thing is bringing them together. How are you going to do that? If you have 7 disparate systems and you're trying to bring all these things together, you can see where you have efficiency issues, let alone quality issues in terms of correlating and bringing that stuff together. So you need to enable the team with this data, with tooling, with automation. And in today's age now, we're also talking about cognitive assistance, machine learning, AI, those kind of things now can really take that automation to the next level. Thirdly, don't forget about the basics, right? Seems obvious, but again, we don't want to forget about it. Ticketing systems, reporting, telephony, all of those kind of things are key elements that you have to consider when you're building out your security operations. And on top of all that, and you're going to hear me say it over and over again, is automation. Automation is the only way to be able to scale your operations. It provides resiliency. It helps alleviate some of the pain caused by attrition. The strategy comes to life inside of your automation, right? It's a method by which you impose your strategy or you infuse your philosophy into the systems. And it sets you up for measurement, which you'll see is another key piece. Always measure. Again, seems fairly straightforward, but make sure that you are being deliberate about it. What are you going to measure? Make sure you think about these things as you're setting things up. And you're not only interested in the obvious things like utilization, efficiency, productivity. You want to validate your model, right? You want to validate the strategy at the top of the philosophical pyramid, right? You want to ensure that the things that you are doing are in line with your model. They're in line with your strategy. They're in line with your philosophy and culture. Oh, and also, don't forget automation. Automation is key at this stage as well. And where you have automation, you almost always have something you can measure. So it's a synergistic sort of setup. So how do we do this? Align outsourcing decisions based on your business needs and leverage partners. The idea here is to beg, borrow, and build. SOC operations can become very complex and very broad and tall, and you're not going to be able to do it entirely by yourself. Leverage what you have. Think about the basics that we talked about: ticketing, telephony, reporting. Do you already have those solutions inside of your company? If you have ticketing, how are you going to leverage that already, right? If you have a company delivering reporting for you, if you're using a third party to assist in your business intelligence reporting, can they help you with your security reporting? Do you have a company delivering a technical solution for you that also does something on the security side? Can you leverage that? And then, of course, there's the idea of outsourcing, staffing, expertise, those kind of things. So, in review, business strategy equals security strategy. They must be aligned and must start from there. They need to, be in tune and synergistic with each other. Utilize intelligence. And when we talk about utilizing intelligence, not only talking about threat intelligence, we're talking about our own asset, internal system intelligence, as well as our business intelligence. And then on top of that, how are we bringing that all together and allowing the analyst to utilize that data as strongly as they can. Don't forget the basics: ticketing, all of those things, ticketing, telephony, all of that stuff, CRM, that needs to be involved. Always measure, again, very obvious, but very important. Build, borrow, buy. And this is the how. How do you do this? You do everything you can. Leverage all of the things that are available to you before you start spending oodles of money. All right, let's talk about pitfalls real quick. Measuring. So I'm going to touch on measuring again. One of the things that we see happen a lot, and we fight this even internally, is the idea that here is the stuff that we decided to measure, and we're going to measure this forever, and this is how we determine how well we're doing from here until forever. The problem with that is by not adjusting what we're measuring, we're not adjusting to the changing environment. And a real quick example is you may start off wanting to measure your false positive rates, and for various reasons. That's a good idea, right? That can help you tune your system. You can start to bring those things down, et cetera, et cetera. A year from now, your false positive rate may not have changed for 4 months. Does it then become important? Maybe not. Maybe you look for something else to measure. And you also don't want to force your team to be doing work that was good today and isn't good tomorrow, right? If you have it in your mind, for instance, that a team that is constantly looking into what look like security incidents is exactly what I need, then somewhere down the road, if your security incident numbers come down, you may feel like your efficiencies have dropped. When in fact, what should be happening now is that team should be feeding back into the system, working on automation, digging into the intelligence data, making that intelligence more robust, validating their automation, validating their cognitive systems. All of that kind of stuff is stuff that we don't think of, but as we avail ourselves of more time, it becomes more important. Some operational things that we worry about. Expertise challenges. I sort of touched on it a second ago. It's difficult to find security expertise. Not only is it difficult to find them, it's difficult to keep them. So how are we doing that? Are we building robust training? Are we outsourcing? What is the option there? And then lack of priority, time wasters, and shallow and incomplete intelligence. I group those together because they oftentimes have similar solutions in terms of automation and some of these cognitive systems that we're starting to see now, right? So lack of priority. If I'm chasing every item as if it were a severity 1 incident, I'm going to ultimately overreach and I'm going to miss things. If I'm digging too deeply into every little thing, I'm going to overreach. And then on the flip side, if I'm not digging deeply enough, I'm going to miss a lot of stuff. So how do I cope with that? Some of these cognitive systems allow, like the QRA, for instance, allow me to dig deeply on something, or somebody else is going to dig deeply on something for me, and it's going to present me with that data. It's already done that digging. It's already gone out and cultivated data across a data set that I couldn't do as an analyst, or if I did do, it would take me, crazy amounts of time. So automation and availing yourself of these new systems is really going to help with time wasters. It's going to help with lack of depth. It's going to, I should put it the other way. It's going to increase your ability to go deep. And it's going to help you with, I guess that's it. That's the point I'm trying to make. So those are the pitfalls. And with that, I think I'm going to hand it over to Evelyn.
Thanks, Darren. Actually going to hand it over to Chris here to walk us through how we can actually address some of the pitfalls and challenges that you just mentioned. So Chris, over to you.
Thanks, Evelyn. So Darren did a great job of covering some of the stuff there and how cognitive or artificial intelligence is starting to play a role within the security operations environment. And that's exactly what Curator Advisor is designed to do. So, how are we using artificial intelligence in the SOC to help, right? We know that the people aspect of people, processes, and technology are there. And humans bring a certain aspect that's necessary. Even when you start applying artificial intelligence into an arena like your Security Operations Center, you still need that human expertise to bring the things that only a human can bring. Compassion, common sense, the capability to, abstract information and look at it at a certain perspective. AI is young technology, but that's why we still rely on technology and the human aspect to kind of bridge things together. When you think about tools that are in place that make important, decision processes for the security analyst, that's where your security analytics tools play a huge role within the security operations environment. Bringing together data elements through a correlation, looking for those anomalies that are out there and helping to prioritize what that analyst should really be focusing in on, and then being able to visualize it into something that an analyst can really help to interpret. Artificial intelligence adds a layer into this to make the security operations environment, one, automated. That was kind of something that Darren continued to stress that we're starting to move towards as you're developing your SOC, look towards automation. Cognitive capabilities and artificial intelligence bring in information to help automate, but it also brings in an area that even the human can't cover everything, and that's essentially efficiency. So unlocking information in all the amount of data that an analyst has to look at to help derive, some level of decision making to either escalate, to close out, to continue to dig further and find more information is where artificial intelligence can help you by going into data, specifically data on an unstructured level, using information in terms of natural language by looking at cyber intelligence in the same way that an analyst would look at it. Being able to layer in machine learning and cross-correlate things in ways that humans can't do very, very quickly. So when you bridge all those things together and bring them together, AI can play a big role in the security operations environment to do this. So how do we apply it to, cybersecurity specifically, and how we're applying it using Watson for cybersecurity technology within the security operations environment? So Watson is really designed to ingest mass amounts of information, cyber intelligence, both on a structured perspective of bringing in threat feeds that we generally are able to bring into firewalls and SIEMs today and do very simple pattern matching type of activities. But we also ingest vast quantities of unstructured information, being able to go out and read things like security blogs and the breaking news sites and have a grasp on deep level threat write-ups and be able to extract and learn information the same way that a physical human analyst would be able to bring that information in. We classify all that information, select it, and normalize it into cybersecurity informational terms. That's really super important to have from an artificial intelligence application. Using natural language, as I mentioned, to be able to interact with it and process it in the context of cybersecurity. Watson has to understand exactly what cybersecurity means in the same conceptual terms that a human analyst would. And we've put a lot of priority in training and teaching Watson what cybersecurity means, so much that we've even, processed and had it take the CISSP exam just to understand how much does it interact and understand with cybersecurity language. And that's part of training and learning. With just like any of us, we have to take continuing education, and we are out looking for new information and learning about all the latest that we do with cybersecurity. We have to train Watson, and we have to help continue to build its knowledge base. And a lot of that is based on how we interact and provide feedback with it. And then lastly is being able to visualize information. Watson uses a very large knowledge graph to build relationships of data. And that is how we ask and we can get information back, and how it's able to quickly connect the dots. Things that analysts are able to do as you start to bleed through your investigation and figure out, okay, how is all this interconnected? That's the same technology, or the same types of things that Watson is using AI technology to do, is to build those relationships. So Curator Advisor with Watson is our AI tool that's really implemented to help augment the security operations analyst, that frontline guy. And what we're doing, and the goal we're trying to do with Advisor and with Watson, is to accelerate incident analysis, using automation to investigate, to have all of that deep level information that Darren talked about, and have it go either deep or shallow, or just look at the incident itself and make a decision on whether or not there's suspicious behavior that an analyst needs to look at. So that helps with prioritization of the aspect too. It reduces the complexity of the information. It applies AI technology to help ultimately lower the time that it takes to make a decision either in the stack or even to remediate the incident fully. Watson's using reasoning information to discover, to look at threat intelligence from all across the internet, to bring contextual information into it, understand how it's related to your original investigation, and understand and bring in the gaps of knowledge that a particular analyst may just be overlooking because maybe they're overworked, maybe that they're into the shift, maybe they've already worked 12 tickets in the day, or even if they're just coming in and they're getting started in the day, it helps them get that edge and getting off on the right foot in their investigation. So how does Advisor work specifically? Well, it starts with having a security analytics platform, specifically Curator. This helps set up some of the automation that's there. The analytics get performed. It does offense analysis. It identifies the components that a SOC analyst has to be able to look at as part of something that is occurring within the environment. Advisor is the component that sits locally with Curator. They're kind of a team here. So they're performing local data mining. They're extracting the investigatable information. There's the automation aspect that's coming into play to gather the contextual elements from within the particular security incident that an analyst would need to be investigating. This is where a lot of time savings takes place, because as an analyst is going out, having to conduct an investigation, they spend a lot of time having to pivot through information, look at various sources of data, bring it all together. That's just collection. Then they have to take it out somewhere and start to begin a research process, whether that goes out to, a Google and you start looking for things. And then you have to bring back all of that and start to begin a correlated activity. Advisor gathers all of that and uses Watson for Cybersecurity to apply its knowledge around analytics and external threat intelligence to be able to connect those dots very, very quickly, saving all of that time that analyst is able to do. So rather than have to spend the vast amount of time that an analyst does gathering that and researching it, they can actually start to interpret those results very, very quickly. Once an advisor has got all this information, we provide that analyst our information very, very quickly. We provide all the relationships. We give them visualization to allow them to start digging into that so they can start making the connections and understand, okay, where do I need to start to begin? What do I need to escalate? Who do I need to escalate this off to? So really, it's very, very easy to deploy. It's a great tool within the SOC environment, and it's designed to really reduce that time that it takes to make that decision. When seconds count within the security operations environment, this is the tool that you should be looking at from a SOC perspective. Advisor is a consumable app on top of Curator. You can go out to the IBM Security App Exchange, download it at no cost for 30 days, run it in the environment, and test it for yourself. So, just to kind of recap some of the things that Advisor delivers on, we mentioned accelerating an analysis, using that AI to automatically investigate and provide automation into the security operations environment. It gathers that information, that deep level information that an analyst needs to be able to pull, both from the internal environment and the external environment, as well as performing that external threat research, which is critical to the investigation process. The key thing here is we're trying to actually highlight, do I as an analyst need to dig in further on this, or is this something that is not a threat to the environment and I can focus my attention more on something that would be important? I want to be able to conduct smarter investigations. Watson helps identify things that whether or not your defense in depth posture is actually working. Are your firewalls stopping what they say they're stopping? Are the IDS is working like they're supposed to be working? Has malware executed on my endpoints? And if so, can I highlight that I know that my endpoint solution stopped it, or that it did execute and I need to then begin a remediation process on those systems to determine what I'm dealing with? A big component of being an analyst is identifying the who's involved, so what's involved and how is it all interconnected. So being able to highlight critical systems and assets within my environment. Who are the users that are impacted in this information? What are those users are specifically? Are they people who are already watching? Are they service accounts that shouldn't be used? We're connecting all of that information together to help bring the bigger picture into what the entire threat scope is. At the end of the day, it's about one process, taking that information to make it actionable as part of my escalation. It doesn't stop from an investigative perspective in the SOC. There are teams that have to go out and perform next level actions. It's a team-oriented effort, and to be able to provide valid, confident information is what the SOC analyst needs to be able to do. So with that, I have a short demo video that we're going to play for you guys and show you how it works. In this brief demo of Curator Advisor for Watson, we're going to see how Advisor delivers on the values of being able to help accelerate the incident and analysis phase, conduct a more intelligent investigation, and be faster when it comes to incident response so that we can hand information off to our IR responders that's actionable and allows them to take the next steps in remediation. Curator Advisor's AI helps to analyze information from the offense itself. For instance, here we're looking at offense number 29, which is involving a particular user using some explicit credentials to log into a system. We can use Advisor to automatically investigate the information in the incident to help analyze whether or not there's an investigation here to conduct at all. By clicking Investigate, Advisor begins to process to gather external and internal threat indicators from the offense itself. During this process, we're collecting information such as IP addresses, URLs, domain names, file hashes, and allowing a research process to begin, which is sent to Watson. Watson then performs external threat intelligence research on the information that's been provided and highlights the existence of whether or not something has occurred that an investigator needs to dig in further on. This can take just a matter of minutes as Watson begins its process of gathering this information and conducting its research strategy. As we see, Watson's already returned results back with regards to the investigation. What an analyst receives is what we call the Watson Insights, a summary paragraph of what's been discovered to this point. While we look at this, we could see that Watson is still currently investigating additional mechanisms within the Curator offense database to determine how large the scope of the threat has been for this particular offense. If we look at this particular insights, we can see that Watson was able to analyze 48 observables from the offense. Those are the various components that were extracted for the investigation. Additionally, Watson was able to discover 6 new pieces of information that were not part of our investigation. That's helping the analysts discover things that were unknown to them. As we start to look at Watson's insights, we can see that there are heavy ties to suspicious activity, in particular malicious components that are, in particular, 15 files and 1 IP address. And Watson has evidenced this information based on what it knows from 3 antivirus signatures. Watson has also discovered critical components of the investigation, such as the who. One user that was associated with this, our user Tom Wilson, who is actually to be known on a UBA watch list. Additionally, what's impacted, our advisor has also helped to identify 8 high-value assets associated with this particular offense. Watson is now using the additional analysis results to find additional local context within Curator to help determine the entire threat of this scope. By clicking on the Watson tab and clicking on our incident, we gain a high-level overview of the information associated with our offense. Incident information at the top, source information in the middle, additional insight information provided at the bottom. Within the Watson tab is the evidence that suggests why Watson's investigation has come to the conclusion it has, identifying 5 AV signatures, 15 file names, 2 URLs, and 16 IP addresses that are associated with their investigation. An analyst can pivot from here into the knowledge graph. The knowledge graph contains a lot of different information to look at. Let's look at a few of these components and see how Watson's able to help us identify communications that were a part of our particular offense. As we can see, prominently displayed in the middle by the yellow icon is our user, Tom Wilson. If we click on Tom, we can see that UBA has actually brought over some risk information to show us that Tom's profile or his current risk score is 5,192 and climbing as indicated and trending up. You can easily pivot into UBA and identify those items that are causing this risk to increase. If we look at his risky activity timeline, we can see that there are multiple accesses into high-risk resource, point-of-sale systems, which should be of concern, user geography changes, malicious sources and malnet access, as well as anomalous geographies accessing. All things that an investigator would probably want to take a look at further. Pivoting back into our knowledge graph, if we close down this particular item, we can see additional items associated with the investigation. These items that have double rings are assets that have been discovered as part of our Curator asset database and integration. They're quickly called out with high-value information such as the asset weight. If we dive into one of these individually, we can see that the asset information provided helps an analyst gain quick identity information into what type of asset we're dealing with, its host name, its description, who are the owners and the contacts, and where is it located. Moving back into our knowledge graph, we can see that Watson has indicated that there is suspicious or malicious activity associated with this particular IP address. If we click on our IP address node and investigate here, we can see quickly, based on our concern information, our risk score, that this is in the upper right-hand quadrant and indicates that this is very toxic and highly relevant to our investigation. We've enriched this information with X-Force Exchange data to help us identify what X-Force knows about it, as well as additional identity information such as who is record to help quickly determine where this is located, when it was created, and who to contact. IP reputation information has been enriched as well from multiple third-party sources. On the Reference tab, Watson has provided us a natural language document to help us understand more about why this IP address may be associated with our investigation. We know we're dealing with multiple sets of malware in this particular case. By looking at some of the malware involved, we can see and hone in on whether or not these items were actually impacting our assets or whether or not our antivirus solution conducted the proper course of action. If, for instance, if we look at this particular item, we can see that this asset communicated with this file. The last execution state tells us that this was blocked. If we hover over our relationship information, we can determine that yes, indeed, the file was reported as blocked from our antivirus solution. Diving into additional threat research that Watson has provided, we can see information regarding this particular hash. Information from VirusTotal has been provided, as well as information from a Trend Micro white paper indicating that this antivirus is actually, or this virus is associated with point-of-sale RAM scraping malware. Watson's additional analysis has helped us narrow in to the additional threat scope. As we see, we move larger into or further away from our investigation into these green items, we can see that there's yet another user that's impacted, helping us to reveal the actions of what this user has conducted as part of our investigation. In this case, our administrator user logged into this particular asset, which happens to be our point-of-sale credit card database, and attempted to execute another piece of malware. But as indicated on the graph, the file was reported as blocked from executing, which will help our analysts not waste time looking at malware on this particular device. As an analyst is able to extract critical information from this to help aid the incident response process, we can gather that pertinent information up and help perform action on it or recommend for escalation. Analysts are easily able to dive into the observables, the various types of relationships, and export information in a couple of different formats to help expedite the process for remediation. Additionally, we've discovered items that have provided additional threat information and can add those information into watch lists such as IPs, domains, or URLs to continue to build an in-depth defense analysis. Curator Advisor and the information that's provided very quickly helps an analyst conduct their research, make a decision in the under 20-minute time frame that's necessary to help proceed investigation into something that is able to be actionable and remediated in a timely fashion.
Okay, so that was an interesting session. Now, if you have any questions, we can take it up. Before I move on to the questions, I basically wanted to discuss 5 things which are associated with the evolution of a SOC, and everybody is somewhere in the journey, right? Of course, the basic part, which is step number 1, comes with building strong protection technologies, right? Which I'm sure most of you have: the firewalls, the intrusion prevention, the antivirus, the DLPs, etc. Right? These are all protection and prevention technologies. But we see there are still compromises, attacks happening. Example, WannaCry, or the recent ransomware examples, or malware example, right? So which means there are compromises which are still getting through these protection technologies, causing exploits. So step number 2, you have to focus on building advanced detection technologies for bringing visibility into certain gray areas, right? Like, for example, if the same file hashes are just moving across the network with multiple users, it could be a potential malware, right? Just give one example. And there are various technologies which fall under advanced detection. You have network behavioral analytics. You have something like APT, advanced persistent threats. These are all different technologies which fall under advanced detection, bringing in more visibility into the gray areas. Now, once this is done, the third step is to bring in accelerated investigation, because the advanced detection technologies will tell you what is happening, will fire an alert. Somebody to investigate quickly and understand what is a threat and what is a false positive. Now, this is where the investigation skills, the Watson, comes into picture. Now, if somebody has a great investigation skill today, need not necessarily mean the person will have the great investigation skills a couple of days later, right? It's all emotional consistency. Technical consistency is slightly difficult because we're talking about speed, skill, and intelligence. And these 3 aspects sometimes are not in sync in a human being. They're inconsistent, right? Of course, there are exceptions, but unfortunately, we do not have such exceptional candidates, in our environment. They may not be there for all the time. So that's where Watson comes into picture, which helps you accelerate your investigation. Instead of you reading a blog, you reading a post, you reading a research paper, or you reading some third-party threat intel websites. All of that is done by Watson at the back end, looking at structured and unstructured data. I'll give you a small example. There was a zero-day malware for which there was a research done by a researcher in a university in US, and that was published somewhere in a blog as an image file. Now, how do you read an image file, make a sense out of it, and build into your analytics? It's not an easy thing, right? Watson does that. Today, Watson can understand unstructured data, understand what is a malware, what is a ransomware, and says, give annotation that this is a potential threat. Once you're through with accelerated investigation, step number 4 is how do you want to now respond to the incident? And you know for sure this is a malware, and you know for sure there are systems in your environment which are infected. You need to then have integration of people, process, and technology to make sure you have a documented response system, documenting the artifacts, what needs to be done, what all information you need to disclose to which all institutions for which you are probably liable, right? You might have recently seen the Facebook data theft scandal, right? So they are now liable across several countries, right? And they need to disclose what data went out, at least to the users who are registered, right? Not to the world, but at least to the users whose data has gone out. Otherwise, there can be very tough legal implications, especially in some countries, where they can be completely banned, right? I keep telling this to few people that data is the new electricity in the economy. And just like electricity, it is potentially dangerous if not regulated correctly. And that's where there are huge challenges and as well as huge opportunities for us to, address it and build and evolve over it. So step number 4, incident response, which integrates people, process, and technology. Now the step number 5, now this is really a dream. I don't know how many organizations can today afford it, is threat hunting. Hunt the attacker who's hunting you. This is the final, I wouldn't say really final because there's so many other more things, but today some very few focused organizations have threat hunters whose only job is to find out who is coming after my organization, right? This involves analytics of unknown entity versus unknown entity. I'll give you a simple example. A person having 3 different Facebook profiles, but a single phone, and the user is changing the SIM cards probably every other day, and it could be a potential compromise of a country security, of an infrastructure security. Look at what happened in Afghanistan, right? It was basically a very smart bunch of people who were doing the similar activity. They were just swapping the SIM cards or throwing away the SIM cards after a particular communication. How do you build analytics of unknown versus unknown? That's where threat hunting skill comes into picture. And if you're already there, which means you're doing a phenomenal job of security of building security in your organization. So today we have customers who somewhere in these 5 steps. Somebody is in step 2, somebody is in step 3, somebody is looking forward to step 4, and I am yet to come across at least the IT companies, or I would say enterprises or banks looking at step 5. Yesterday I was having a detailed discussion with a very large bank, and the biggest challenge was actionable insights. I know you have a fantastic product, but now I want to know if I detect a certain threat or incident, how do I automate the response? How do I automate or orchestrate and kind of say build a system which can automatically patch a system, which can automatically block an IP, or take a response which can contain the damage? And that's what we're doing today. We have the strongest integrations available with our products and various other OEMs today, right? To name a few: Checkpoint, Palo Alto, Carbon Black, Resilient, etc., which can go ahead and remediate or contain the damage. That's what is actionable insights, because I don't want to waste time sitting and investigating all the indicators of compromise. Once I see that there are indicators of compromise, how do I quickly click a button, or without even clicking a button, contain the damage? So this is the evolution, and this is going to take a while for organizations to figure out. And to be honest, every organization is still evolving. But the key is to evolve, not to be stuck there. Because even if you're 1 step ahead, 1 step, you take 1 step a day, I'm sure you're building a stronger ecosystem, a stronger orchestration to be better prepared. Today, the biggest challenge is preparedness. Are you prepared if there's a compromise today at this time? And that's where I would say majority or most of the organizations are struggling. So with that, I would like to conclude my session and move on to Q&A and look at some of the questions for which you might need, which I can respond now. Just give me a minute.
Thank you very much, sir. Yes, we have a couple of questions in the chat.
Yeah, can you read them out to me, please?
Sure. So we have the first question, which reads, how the other applied security measures can be connected with this solution, like IAM, PIM, WAF, etc.?
Yeah, so during the session webinar, you heard that today information sources are many, right? And the biggest challenge is a mystery is caused by too much of information which you can't make sense of. If you cannot make sense of information, there's a confusion and there's a mystery. And that's what the attackers do. They keep you confused while they get in and they get out, and finally there's a compromise, and then you're doing all reactive measures. This is where the organizations are struggling. Today, our system, which is the security intelligence platform, can take feeds from any source. It can be an event. It can be a flow, like typically like a CCTV camera. That's the closest analogy I can give. It can look at vulnerability information. It can look at configuration information. It can also look at complete packets, which is the complete reconstruction of digital impression in the environment when the compromise happened. Hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you very much. So ladies and gentlemen, if you wish to ask any question, please type in a question in the chat panel. We have one more question from...
Yeah,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, please go ahead, please.
Right, so we have a question from the audience. How VATSers do intelligent investigation? Is that integrated with our network or public?
Yeah, so currently the Watson API is only available with Curator. And what we bring in there is the speed of execution. There are three things to remember when it comes to cognitive, right? So today people are talking a lot about AI, machine learning, blah, blah, blah. There's nothing new. This was age old, right? There was an incident when, a Target store, employees knew which product with which flavor and which fragrance to sell to a specific customer. I'm talking about at least 10 years back. So it's not really, we're just only using some new jargon maybe, which is good. But all this analytics is nothing new. It's been there. Several companies have been doing this. What we bring in is understand the information first. Just like a human, just like a very sharp human being, understand the information. Next, reason with information. Somebody took cab from this location A to location B, reached in 15 minutes. There's some other user who took the same cab, from the same location, took another cab, but reached in a probably lesser time. I reason with that information, and I feed that back that this is a better route to take during this hour, right? Once I reason, I learn from that information, and I feed that back onto my system. That's exactly what Watson is doing today by crawling several millions and billions of data points from close to 20,000 different sources or even more, right? The other aspect is once I learn this information and I have a corpus of knowledge, the other three things to remember is how do I use this information now to bring in the speed, skill, and accuracy. It's very, very important that all these three are in sync, because when you're focusing at speed, sometimes accuracy goes for a toss. And sometimes when you're focusing on accuracy, your speed goes for a toss. So Watson Advisor, which is the module available with Curator today, is to bring all these three components completely in sync. Hopefully that answers the question.
Thank you very much. We have the next question. Is there a public repository of documents that can be used by new SOC team? Basic email templates, incident process, etc.
Yes, there are plenty of information available today. We're going to share some links at the end of the session. Keep following the links. When the ransomware was out, I think within few hours, we gave out an incident response plan and published it on our site. What steps you need to take to respond to this incident, which was free. Irrespective if you have a product or don't have a product, there's a documented step-by-step procedure of what you need to do when there's a ransomware. So it is available. We'll share some links, some really fascinating information, for which you don't even need to have IBM products. Next.
Thank you very much.
Any further questions?
Moving to the next question. Well, doesn't data localization challenges occur with Watson taking feed from a specific organization? Example, how an IBM Curator deployed at a government organization will use AI?
Yeah, so that's a fantastic question. There are several aspects to it, but just to set the context right here, we only take the public indicators which are there in an incident. When I say public indicators, an IP address, a file name, a file hash, a domain name, or what have you. Now, the reason why it makes sense to send this data is because anyways, the information which you have downloaded is public now. For example, you downloaded a file from the internet, it's anyway a public file. Or you went to a specific portal, that URL is anyways public. Similarly, you hit a malware IP, that information is anyways public. So we're not taking any of your private information. So we do two things there. One is local context, which is purely building analytics around the information which is available with Curator internally. The second part is enrichment with Watson corpus of knowledge. That's the step 2, Watson enrichment. And the step 3, we go a step further and say, what are the other incidents where I see the similar indicators? For example, if you downloaded a malware, I can say that this malware is associated with 10 other incidents or 10 other offenses. Hopefully that answers the question.
We have the next question. How data is collected and shared in form of sticks format using Curator?
So we definitely do support sticks and taxing. And today there are so many open source intelligence tools available. I'm sure you heard about it. Even our information is free. You can go to IBM X-Force Exchange. You can type in any IP address. You can type in any malware file hash or what have you. It will throw up analytics around what it has learned about that information or about that metadata. On top of that, you can aggregate today several threat intel onto a single platform. For example, if you have feeds coming from 10 different sources, all those threat feeds can be now aggregated onto a same console. We have an app called Threat Intel app. Once you install that app and you put in all your intelligence sources or threat intel sources, it aggregates and constantly downloads the information, and that information can be used then to correlate incidents or correlate events in your environment.
Thank you very much. With the next question, can we integrate the Watson with security tools to investigate the incident with accuracy and to increase protection?
Okay. As I already said, currently this API is only available with Curator. So if you're running Curator, yes, you can download the app. There's a 30-day eval. You can contact us. We'll help you with how to use this app, and we can take it from there. But at this stage, we do not have this API public. There are some reasons to it, because there is some privacy involved in it. There is certain bit of data regulations involved in it. So we are very careful of what we are doing with this information by not putting it public. Because the moment we put it public, if there is any, I would say breach, we're still exploring that possibility. Hopefully, we should have some, we are still contemplating at this stage. Hopefully, we should have some answers by the end of this year.
Thank you very much. The next question, does Watson collect information from dark web?
Yes, to some extent I can say yes. But the challenge today, I'll say, what we see is the information which is on dark web today are typically email addresses, phone numbers, somebody's income, what the person is earning, where is the address, and all of this information. We are still not finding that relevant with the security analytics. And yeah, maybe that could be the next roadmap of building and understanding and I would say normalizing that data to correlate with the incidents. But there are today several third-party dark webs available. You can integrate that with Curator, and we can normalize the data and tell you that this incident is associated with this dark web data. So we are not completely there yet to be more precise.
Thank you very much. We have one more question. What if incident is generated by insider threat? Will Watson won't take feed for that incident or not?
No, if it's an insider threat, I don't even need to send any analytics to Watson. But yeah, what will happen is, if there is an insider threat, in most probable cases, it would have been some infection which has happened outside or inside the network when the user is browsing or when the user is checking out some mail, clicking on some phishing mail, etc. Right? So we still do analytics around that. Right? Today, insider threat is very simple. I have my, one of the basic things which you need to understand is attackers are smart. Right? There's no two ways about it. They know that they cannot penetrate an enterprise straight away. So the best way to penetrate is steal the credentials. So if I'm impersonating as someone else, I have the complete luxury of going from north to south, east to west in your network. And we can detect that today. We can detect that if there is a credential, how it is being used. We have an interesting app called User Behavior Analytics, which has at the back end machine learning and several algorithms running, which can bring you analytics as to who is using this credential, from where they are using, is it being accessed from multiple geographies? If so, what is the reputation of those geographies? And if so, what are further linkages with malwares, with malware file hashes, and etc. using Watson Analytics? That's the last step.
Thank you very much. We have just received one more question. What are the chances of false positive?
See, at the end of the day, one great news with security industry is you cannot automate everything. You need people. And the second good news is we don't have enough people, right? So you cannot replace an investigator. It's difficult. You can make an investigator's job easier. You can, enable the investigator taking a much more intelligent action, but that human interface, this is my opinion again, not IBM's, in my opinion, that can never be replaced. If you're an expert, if you're an investigator, I think you'll continue to do the job. Maybe instead of you doing the job in 6 hours, it will reduce that to maybe 1 hour or maybe half an hour or sometimes maybe 5 minutes.
All right. So thank you very much. And we have one more question now. Does Curator need DSMs to ingest data from some source to use Watson on that data?
No. So these two are different things. When you say DSM, Device Support Module, is a module which is normalizing the events from a specific raw data. Right? We don't need a device support module to send data to Watson Analytics. But yes, whatever information you see in the incident is already normalized. Right? If there is some information which is not normalized, obviously you will not see an incident associated with it. So the first step is to do the log baselining and look at the data and find out which data is missing. Among all the structured data, what is the data points which are missing, which are not getting parsed, which are not getting normalized correctly? And the first step is to ensure that you build, if required, a custom properties around that data so that it is normalized, so that you can build your correlation rules around the property. Post which that incident, if it fires, can be then sent to Watson for further analytics.
Thank you very much. So at this time, we have no further questions from the audience. I would like to turn the program back to you, Mr. Umashankar, for any final or closing comments.
Okay, sure. So we'll be sharing, you can just maybe flash those links in the chat so that users can explore further. We have a phenomenal university called Security Learning Academy. Feel free to explore. There's a whole lot of information, trainings, labs, mostly hands-on, and not just verbal GAM, which will definitely help you equip yourself better. Right? And take it as a journey. As I told you, we are evolving every day, and it's good to evolve. Because if we're stagnated at one place, especially with respect to security, personally, or even for your company, it can be a potential, there can be potential ramifications. And we do not know how or when we're going to pay back. Right? And please do let me know what topic interests you, which we can further bring in more discussions around it or more webinars around it. Okay, and thank you.